allowing us to discuss this, and not only here in this room at the National Endowment for Democracy, but also making it available via live stream to audiences worldwide, and particularly to those friends of ours who are in the Balkans right now and I know are watching, as you have told me. We're also going to be tweeting this event, so please join us for discussion online using a hashtag SEMA events. We might be also taking some questions, provided we have no technical difficulties from Twitter, so please feel free to pose those that way. Going back to what I was saying earlier is I'm joined here by two true veterans, and I will begin with Marija Šajkaš, who is the head of Development and Operations at the Media Diversity Institute in New York. She was a journalist in the Balkans, in Serbia, covering the wars in former Yugoslavia before coming to New York, and continues to be an engaged media professional in the region, providing consulting services and research on media. The most interesting part for me, I have to say, was the fact that she's also a novelist, and her interests in particular are covering historic female figures from that region. So considering that we have an all-women panel, something that is always welcome in Washington, I think I really wanted to mention that. And then really a figure in her own right in the media world in the Balkans, Milka Tadić-Mijović, of the Weekly Monitor in Montenegro. She's the co-founder and executive director of what is the first weekly independent newspaper in Montenegro. Was also a grantee of NED for a couple of years, many moons ago. And someone who was also, I read, was one of the first, or the first journalist who was fired for her criticism of Slobodan Milošević's suppressive and aggressive in the region. She continues to be a fierce critic and a very prolific journalist on issues such as corruption, and was named by Reporters Without Borders among the 100 information heroes. So as you can see, we're joined here today by some, not just experts, but real heroes in this media sector. I was going to begin this talk with obligatory mention of the 20th anniversary of Dayton Peace Accords. It is 2015, so this is an important year, an important anniversary. And then I was at a talk last night where a veteran foreign policy expert was addressing up-and-coming leaders in foreign policy, and basically said that number one mistake everybody makes when they open up a talk is to talk about history and what happened. He said that the first thing you want to do is tell people, so what? Why does it matter why we're all here? Grab their attention and entice them to stay for the rest of the talk. So I will begin with why. Why does this matter? Why you should care, and what we're trying to talk about here. And why we should care is because in a 10-year period following the signing of the Dayton Peace Accords, from 1996 to 2006, the international community invested $290 million, is from some information that I was able to find, into media development. Of that, roughly $160 million was direct support to media. The rest was technical assistance, training, and other forms of support. Where that leaves us today, 20 years later, is that the World Press Freedom Index ranks countries like Montenegro at number 114, and Macedonia at number 117. In between them is Tajikistan, if that provides a reference point for you. On the Media Sustainability Index by IREX, countries like Macedonia and Serbia are still listed in the unsustainable category. So this is the reason why we should care, is lots of money was put in particular because media played a very important, albeit very negative role in fomenting the wars in the 90s. And I think there was a widespread recognition that investment in media is actually paramount to any democracy, development, and sustainability of the regional peace. But today, as we see the situation as was told at a Columbia University's event a couple of weeks ago, where you were, by the media freedom representative of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, otherwise known as the OSCE, she said the media situation in the Western Balkans today is worse than it was in the immediate period following the wars of the 1990s. Now, that's a pretty strong statement. So, Marija, let me begin with you. Do you agree with what Ms. Mijatovic said in the statement, and what does this mean? What's the media situation in the Balkans today?
Yeah, before I do that, I need to quickly say that I was not a war correspondent. I worked before the wars, during the wars, and after the war, but just to make that clear. Other brave people were at the front lines doing that type of work. When it comes to Dunja Mijatovic and her remark that in many respects media situation in the Balkans is now worse, yeah, the simple answer is unfortunately yes. And it's a curious thing because in many respects, because let's say during the war we had a strong hold of independent press that was on par to Western press, investigative journalism. We had reliable or mostly reliable sources of information. We had even cooperation across the borders, even during the war amongst the journalists. So there was a flow of information. And also, very important, people did believe to the press. Nowadays, we have abundance of media. I think the figure for Serbia is 1,300. We have very little investigative journalism. Absolutely no, or almost no, people have no consider regards for the press anymore. They don't believe to press. The latest figures are 1 in 4 people are actually saying that press is doing something in Serbia for them. We have bits and pieces of investigating and, straightforward information, which is mostly migrated to internet. And then we have, government control or government influence in media. Yeah.
That summarizes it. It doesn't paint a very positive picture, of course. And I think actually in some of the countries in the region, the situation is even worse than you alluded to. In some countries like Macedonia, journalists are being imprisoned.
Yep.
They're being physically attacked in countries like Montenegro. In countries like Serbia, some journalists require 24-hour police protection. Right now, I think the number is 5 of them. Yes, or
4
or 5 of them.
Yeah.
So, Milka, you come from the smallest country in the region, but one that is the most dangerous, I think, at this point for journalists. As a journalist, like I mentioned earlier, a prolific one, a fierce critic of the government and some of the phenomena there. What is it like to be a journalist in Montenegro? What are the types of pressures that you experience in your work, both as a journalist as well as the executive director of a media outlet?
First of all, I would like to thank you all for coming to this event, and I would like to thank National Endowment for Democracy, which supported Monitor for many years, and SIMA for this wonderful opportunity to talk to you about situation in the Balkans. As we mentioned before, unfortunately, Balkans is not in a focus of Washington anymore, but many things are going on in the Balkans, and I think that Washington should really watch carefully what is going. I think is it okay? I'm sorry. Like this? Okay. Yeah. I mean, you ask me how is it to be journalist these days in the Balkans. It's actually, especially in Montenegro, it's actually depend for who you are working. If you are working for mainstream media, you do not have much problems. But if you are involved in the independent media, it's really very problematic to work for this. Do you hear me? I think something. Yeah. Okay. So many of my colleagues were physically beaten. Some of my colleagues were killed in Montenegro, and many of these cases were never solved. We had just a few year and a half ago in front of the office of the Daily Vijesti. Many of those outlets actually covered the links between those in power and organized crime and their role in the non-transparent privatization. So if you are trying to report in a public interest in Montenegro, you really can have a lot of problems. I think that I fully agree with Dunja Mijatovic, not just in Montenegro, but in some other parts of the region, that on one hand, we are closer to the membership of the EU and NATO, and on another hand, the freedom of expression is decreasing. And many of the media, which were actually a stone of the resistance during the Milosevic time, are now dying in these countries, especially in Serbia. Many ended up in a very non-transparent privatization in the hands of some new owners, and we do not have many investigating reporting in this media. So it is not really easy, but I think it is saying much about the regime in these countries, that we do not have a real functional democracies, and that we do not have a real freedom in this part of the world than of the media situation.
In your response, you were drawing a distinction between mainstream media and independent media. And I'm getting an impression that it's almost impossible these days to be truly independent. One of the forms, if you are indeed truly independent, then you are forcing the forms of pressure that you mentioned. But otherwise, one of the great forms of more subtle pressure, if you will, is government advertising, which has become truly the main source of revenue and income for a lot of media. On the other hand, what we're increasingly seeing as well is foreign investment coming in. There was for a while some foreign investment which has pulled out from, again, are seeing a return of it. But in talking to Maria earlier, I'm getting a sense that that is a positive thing. One has to be careful, actually, in any type of foreign investment and anything that comes with that. So can you tell us a little bit more from your experiences in Serbia and Bosnia, something more about these subtle forms of pressure, both through government advertising, but also comes with the foreign investment ties?
So basically marketing, media marketing in Serbia is shrinking. From 2008, we had 200 million. Now it's down to 150 million euros. And these are the details from a Media Observatory, which is a really great website that tracks media development in the region. So on one hand, we have shrinking media market, less money that's going towards media. On the other side, we have combination of foreign coming to the Serbia, but it's very tightly connected to people holding the power. Nowadays, if a company, and there are around 250 foreign companies present in Serbia that are advertising, again, the same source. If you want to put the advertisement in the paper, let's say, or any media, you are going through marketing agency. We have, most marketing agencies in Serbia are tightly connected to people holding the power. It was really obvious during the previous political structure when some of Democratic Party officials actually owned the same marketing companies. So whoever wanted to do business, in other words, in Serbia had to go through those companies, meaning, being in cahoots with the people in power. Nothing has changed except the labels and names of the companies nowadays in Serbia. And then, since there is increased general poverty in Serbia, right now the money that comes from advertising is actually the most of the money that media can get. So we have a curious thing where actually main censors in some media are people who are in charge for marketing. So director of marketing is the one who says, report or don't use that photo. You can see one of our advertisers parked the wrong way or something like that. And this is you can find the examples of that on a website called Senzolovka. So everything is documented, but it's pocketed on internet. So we have that as really subtle pressure, or not even subtle, as non-pressure at Serbia media today. And very close to that is actually deterioration of media reporting in general. where, because media is very dependent on advertisement money, many media now just reprint PR materials, word by word by word, in like across print media, for instance, or change very little, or just publish press releases. So we are losing on actual reporting. They don't bother to send a reporter to whatever is happening in industry wise, because they know that they will get nicely prepared press release with photos that they will publish, and that's checked. Money is from advertisement is here, and people, editors are happy. So that's another sad thing that is happening, and is in connection to tight connection between advertisement and media. And then finally, media revenue is, as I said, shrinking, and then we have still a number of media that is dependent on government money. And of course, government money, government subsidies equals government influence, right? Serbia did, we have 3 laws that were adopted, media laws. One of them, according to one of them, we're supposed to transfer all media ownership from public to private by the end of this summer, I think, or June 30th. But according to NUNS and other sort of watchdog organizations, the transformation is going really slowly, and which is more troubling, it's not transparent. So that will be yet another thing to be seen, what will happen after the privatization is completed, and government actually, when government supposedly pulls the money away from media.
I think when we are talking about your question is really a key question. Do we really can have independent media in the countries in which money is actually controlled by political elite? You cannot make a real division between those in power and those who are actually having businesses in our country. Usually they are connected. So we do not have just a problem with advertisement from the government, and government and state are the biggest advertisers in these countries. But we do have as well problem with to advertise private business for example, in our media. What happened to me when I'm going around and asking people to advertise with Monitor, some of them are saying to me, you know what, we would like to support you, and we would like money, but please do not publish our ad in your paper. It can cause just a problem. So more than 90% of advertising by the state is going actually to the media who are controlled by the state. And we cannot talk about free media market in our countries, as we cannot talk about a free market economy in our country. Those who are in power actually are owning most of the economy, and they took the resources, the state resources and our resources in last 20 years. Those resources are in their hands. So it is a really key question. Can we have free media in this kind of the environment? But on another hand, there are some signs of hopes because we do have now internet, and you can make some research through the internet. We have wonderful investigations which we can broadcast through the new technology, and so there are really some hopes. And there are some media, traditional media, which are doing great job in this country. Not many of them, but they exist.
Always good to end your comment on a positive note. Before I continue with the next question, I just want to let you know that you did receive a shout out from Dunja from Vienna, who says that I wish I could be with you, wonderful, brave ladies. Great choice, Sima, is what she said. So I just wanted to let you know about that. But what you both describe, in particular you, Milka, are various forms of censorship. So we had outright pressure on one hand, discussed early on in this conversation, but then these are forms of censorship. And in theory, I guess, the Southeast European countries greatly benefit from the geopolitical position or proximity to the European Union. And one of the reasons why there's quite a bit of rush, if you will, to at least on paper, that declaratively reform these media laws talked about is because of the EU accession process. But a question now more frequently arises of whether the EU accession process in itself, in its own right, is enough to remedy the situation. I think here in Washington, we often will say that we would rely on the EU accession process to get these countries on the right path. I mean, this is sometimes, or it's often used as an excuse here in Washington, not to do as much as maybe we used to do from this side of the Atlantic. On the other hand, recently European Fund for the Balkans has issued say that the EU accession process on itself does not provide the necessary protection and the framework to ensure media freedoms. And moreover, recently at an appeal by media practitioners in Serbia, for example, EU Commissioner for Neighborhood Enlargement said that in order for you to act, the EU needs proof of censorship. Never mind the fact that the EU progress report for Serbia was laden with of censorship. How do you comment this? Can we rely on EU accession process as such to take care of this, or is this really a misplaced hope on our part?
I'll be brief. I think that the fact that Serbia adopted certain laws doesn't necessarily mean that those laws are fully, yet placed or appreciated or governed by those laws. And you were referring to a remark made by Mr. Hahn about the censorship, but there was the whole dynamic going between Dunja Mijatovic, who is, I think, more versed into the subject than perhaps him, and Serbian Prime Minister. And, in the midst of this, we had some key radio and TV shows removed from the air for no apparent reasons. We had hacking of prominent websites. Truth to be said, we can't say that the website who was, providing proof against some government politician was hacked from Serbia or in interest of Serbian government or China or, Uganda. That type of proof we don't know, but, you can deduct some things. So, the point being the fact that we are somewhat closer to Europe obviously doesn't mean that, we are protected in any way.
I mean, when we are talking about Europe, we should have in mind some EU countries. For example, Hungary. I mean, Hungary today is in a worse situation than 10 years ago, and how many years they are member of the EU. Or another example, Italy during Berlusconi, such a concentration of media and controlled by prime minister in the old EU member. And when we are talking about our region, you should bear in mind with who you are dealing there. I mean, for example, a prime minister of Montenegro is 25 years in power, quarter of the century. And when we are talking about Montenegro, you have to have in mind that this country never changed power through the democratic elections. We change power only through coups or revolutions. So we have in charge the same communist guys who actually just changed their dress and they wrote, now we are for democracy and freedom and, Our prime minister stated this famous sentence a couple of years ago: the representatives of media are mice that need to be deratized. And why we are mice that should be deratized is because we have been publishing so many reports about his abuse of the power and how he is using his political power to get resources of Montenegro, how he actually captured our state. So, and yes, in Europe, they are really saying Montenegro is the best example in the region how far we are going with the reforms. But in all EU reports, there are statements about the horrible situation of the freedom of expression in the country. And actually, since we start our negotiations couple of on this index freedom list, we were 30 places better than today. Today, we are next to Belarus and Russia in Europe and Macedonia, and next to Tajikistan and this Nigeria. And we are so close to EU and to NATO. So yesterday we had a meeting in State Department with the head of the Balkan division, and he told us that he is actually aware about situation in the Balkans, but the issue is not what kind of the life we have inside the border, but actually the main issue is Montenegro coming to be a member of NATO or member of the EU? It's not that matter. Are we really having a freedom in this country, and do we have a functional democracy? And I think that we do not can have a functional democracy in the country in which we were not able to change the power through the free elections. How can we talk about freedom and free market economy and this kind of thing? So Europe is not the
magic wand,
magic
wand.
which will lead us to the free society.
So you said the comment that you just cited opens up this whole other question of a larger geopolitical issue and influence in the Balkans. You said one word that's a magic word in Washington these days, and that's Russia.
Yes.
And I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask we talk quite a bit here in Washington about Russia's information war and even war on information. I know that last year, sometime in the fall, it was announced that Russia Today will be opening a local branch in Belgrade. And while it might not be running a television channel in Serbian language, there will be an online portal. So can you comment a little bit about the effects of Russia's information war in the Balkans, if any? But not to make this only about Russia, let me expand it even further. Balkans has seen really an increasing number, as I was mentioning earlier, this not just foreign investment in media, but branches of foreign media. Yes, so we have Al Jazeera Balkans based in Sarajevo, N1, a television station which is loosely affiliated with CNN. There is CCTV is there as well, the Anadolu agency from Turkey, some Iranian news agencies as well. So let's talk about maybe Russia Today and Russia First, but also what of these other media outlets that are present?
Yes, definitely. Russia would like to. Russia is actually negotiating in Serbia today to take over some of the Serbian outlets. I think when we are talking about Russian investment in media, we should have in mind that we have, especially in Serbia, Montenegro, and Bosnia, deeply divided society among the issue of where to go, to the east or to the west. Many of the Serbs are very pro-Russia. The same situation is in Montenegro, and we do have as well same situation in Bosnia. So not just that Russia Today is coming to Serbia, but I heard that there are some ongoing serious negotiations between Gazprom to take over some huge media in Belgrade. And as Maria stated before, many media are having a serious financial problems, and I'm sure that they will not think are they going to take Russia's dollars or American dollars, if I can say so. They just need the money. So, and in Montenegro, Russians took many of our enterprises. They were for years major investors, and they took many of the properties on the coast. And if you are in Montenegro, you can see many billboards in Russian language, and they are already owning some media, but those media are actually for their own people who are having properties in Montenegro. I think that they are as well negotiating with some media in Montenegro to privatize them. On another hand, we have a strong influence of American KKR, a fund which took some cable networks in Serbia, and they are actually owning the N1 TV, the Balkan, they call this TV Balkan CNN. So it's a, I think, ongoing battle between the influence between these two countries in the region.
Yeah, if I may add, just briefly. So Russia today is in its TV form present around our cable. It's the same one that you guys can watch here. It's their English service, so you have the taste of it. And there is the portal and radio station as well, and some talks that there will be a Serbian channel. What is also increasingly obvious by observing Serbian media is a presence of Putin, presence of whatever, whatever current international event is happening. There will always be a side covered by what is Moscow saying about it, regardless if it's relevant or it's really not relevant. And there is a stronger and stronger sentiment towards Russia. There is that idea shared in parts of media of, again, like Russian brother that will come to Serbs. If everything fails, there are either Arabs or Russians for us. We had President Putin visited last fall Belgrade. There was a huge parade in Belgrade, and then Serbian media the day afterwards were commenting on who was clapping during the parade of politicians, who wasn't, who was absent, so that we had that level of analysis, if you will. And another interesting thing is when it comes to controlling the media, more so than with the previous political elites. Our current one is actually using some Russian models to control the picture. So we had last winter there was a big storm in parts of Serbia, especially in Feketić, and there was our prime minister braving through the snow, and curiously and conveniently there was TV cameras that were courting him, and he saved the child from snow, and the child was crying in his arm and was very grateful. So, we have tastes of Russia, bits and pieces everywhere, yes.
So, I mean, I think we do have the many similarity in Serbia, Montenegro, and Russia when we are talking about the how regime is using media, the same propaganda, how they are controlling media, this red carpet journalism, everything is wonderful. We are so close to EU. We are implementing reforms. We are, it's controlled, the information they are controlling in the same way in all these three countries. Just the topics are different, of course.
So you painted a pretty dire picture, except that there was one moment with some optimism, and I'm happy to hear more, or maybe others will ask to hear more. But I think let me go back to how we initially started this conversation, and that is the media development and the investment made in media development. And it begs the question of what went wrong. Potentially $290 million, if the information I have is correct, in a 10-year period, following the Dayton Peace Accords. And granted, of course, this assistance has really drastically dropped after during what some call a phase-out period from 2005 until today. But nevertheless, I mean, I'm sure that back in those days, in that period, the hope was that the situation today are different. So what happened? Was something done wrongly? Media assistance was provided? Or was it just beyond the control and expectations of the media assistance providers and really a consequence of other developments that were out of their control?
I think the major problem is actually what kind of society we do have in this country. So I don't think that we finished transition to democracy, and that is the major problem. You know, I mean, the investment in media was really very high. Governments invested a lot in media, but media cannot function if we do not have a functional democracy. We cannot have a freedom of media. So I think that is the major problem. We do not have a real democratic societies in this country, and not just Montenegro and Serbia, but Macedonia, Bosnia, even in Croatia and Slovenia. We have a lot of problems with the media freedom. So the transition to democracy in this part of the region is not finished, and that is the main problem. On another hand, I think that now many of the donors are not present anymore in the region, and these media are left alone, and many of them cannot function because we do not have a real media market, free media market in the region. And these media were actually easy target for the political and business elite to take them over. And that's what happened to many of those media who were supported by the foreign donors. When donors left, they just found the new donors in a political and business elite in the region.
I would like to say something that I hope won't offend people present here, but not all media assistance was equal, you know. And I've started in media development right after the war in Bosnia. I was involved. And we had situations where so-called, foreign experts were coming, completely oblivious on the context, completely unaware of the fact that we had a journalism tradition that predated their appearance, that predated wars. They were reinventing wheels. They didn't understand the context very well. They are pushing their, standards on us, basically, and they're expecting miracles. And they're like, and why you don't do that investigative journalism? A lot of money was poured into investigative journalism. At one point, I think all the Bosnia was investigative journalism. But, and then, of course, there was a question, and why investigative journalism? You don't have that much of investigating reporting in the US. I mean, this was unbalanced. That's really unbalanced. So, and we were sort of, I feel like guinea pigs in a way. Whatever was like, try and error, and then we'll move to the next big conflict, and then Africa, for instance, or Middle East or whatever. And of course, the context is Balkan experience is, who knows? Maybe it will work, maybe it won't work. So there is something to be said about media developments in general. Yeah. That's what I also wanted to say. And then also, at one point, the whole region was saturated with media experts, and people were like, come on, enough is enough. Like, let us do our thing. And this is when, some really good thing happened, but then also we witnessed that some really great reporting was not able without donations. And situation right now is that my colleagues, unfortunately, throughout the region, I think, still don't think in terms that their reporting will bring them money. Still don't think that they should report for people. So they're either advertising, they're reporting for advertisers, they're reporting for government, or they're reporting for donors. There is a discontent connect, thank you, between the public, reporting for the public, and media.
I think it's fair criticism, and you ended your comment on essentially sending a message to your colleagues, to media professionals. I think we should perhaps end our part of the conversation by using this platform as an opportunity for some advocacy. And here in the audience, both present here in the room, but perhaps out there as well, we have media practitioners, we have policymakers, we have people from State Department, potential media assistance providers as well. So maybe in concluding remarks for this part of the conversation, can you maybe send your message to them as what would be helpful now, to the extent that there is goodwill and resources, what would be helpful now for the situation as it is in the Balkans today?
I think the donors should really concentrate on the projects which are dealing with the corruption and organized crime in the country, then with the rule of law, and all of this is very much connected with the media freedom. So I think media should concentrate really the investigation on the abuse of the power of the political elites in the region, and as most of the independent reports from the State Department to the European Union are saying, is that these countries are having a serious problem with the corruption and organized crime. And I think media should play their role in fighting this problem, and donors should concentrate on that. And really, I think the most important for media in the Balkans is to concentrate on fight against corruption and organized crime. Those countries are completely corrupted. They have such a big problem. They cannot develop economy because of the links between political elite and organized crime, and many things are going wrong because of this essential problem. We do not have rule of law in these countries, and that is another big and huge issue on which we all should concentrate.
And for me, I'm a strong believer in regional cooperation. Countries of former Yugoslavia or the Balkans, we have shared history, we have shared culture, shared languages, shared wars that need to be dealt with. So I really think that, and we didn't, there are still so many issues that predated war and that are generated because of the wars, and we didn't deal with them. And that's really necessary if you want sustainable peace and prosperity of the region. I have a great example of, let's say, Bern, working throughout the region, but then also
Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, just for those who may not know.
But then also a really great initiative done by Media Association of Bosnia and Media Association of Vojvodina, which is a nice association of journalists who are not in the center. They are not, centrally based. And they're working on stories that are called Živjeti zajedno, or living together, and stories addressing the nice deeds that are done during the war in between peoples of different nations. So examples like I think really needed. So yes, to say again, I think regional cooperation, and not we shouldn't really close our eyes when it comes to issues of recent past.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think I'm done for my part, and I would like to open now for questions to the audience. I would just like to ask, of course, that you introduce yourself with your name and affiliation. Again, as you know, here in Washington, we'd like you to keep your questions or comments brief, so please don't make long statements. And I think what I would like to do is, I know that how these things usually work is people warm up towards the end, and we'll have very little time. So I think I will start wrapping up and taking last questions about 10 minutes to 2, if that's just, I'm warning you so nobody gets offended. I am known as a tough moderator. And then I will allow some time for the panelists to make their final comments, and we can go from there. And a reminder that we might be taking some questions on Twitter. So I think we had a first question right there.
Hi, thank you very much for your candor. My name is Mindy Reiser. I'm a sociologist and writer, and had the chance to be an election observer in Macedonia last April. My question is about the coverage of the rest of the world in the media in your region. Are there foreign correspondents in places like Africa, continents like Africa, the Middle East, the United States? What kind of coverage is there? Is there interest in doing investigative and original work, or is it mostly just repeating what's in the AP or Reuters or some other mass collection of articles?
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we do not have many correspondents in the world. Nobody, I think. We do not have people in Africa. We are not covering what is going on in the Middle East, what is going on in, for example, war in Syria. Mostly we are using international media agency, Reuters, Associated Press, and the others. But we do not have enough money to have people in this. But we do have following a lot foreign media. For example, CNN or Al Jazeera and some others which are covering these topics.
Yeah, I would say that people in Serbia is equally well informed because of internet. We have the biggest names on cable. Serbia has more than one news agency, so yes, there are some foreign correspondents. And also I would like to use this opportunity to say that actually Tanjug, which is the former Yugoslav agency, a news agency, was established before the Second World War. That's one of, and was the biggest one in the first one in the Balkans. So that's one of the facts that people coming to the region to give training to our journalists after the war didn't know, never knew. So there is, in other words, there is a great tradition in our former countries of, foreign correspondence.
Next one, let's go with Rob Benjamin here in the second row.
Thank you, Ivana. Robert Benjamin with the National Democratic Institute. Thanks to you both. I may be reading a little bit more into what you were talking about, but I had the distinctive idea or impression that when it comes to media freedom and the broader question of democracy in the region, the Balkans in a way are reverting to type, historical type, where it becomes a bit of a playground for to come in and try and play their geopolitical games. And when you have a narrative that now seems to be coming increasingly to the fore of involvement coming from Russia, the presence of Europe, Turkey, the Middle East, you find yourself in a discussion about how do we, from the outside, try to bring Southeastern Europe into NATO, into the European Union, not so much as a reflection of democratic or economic transition, but more as an ability to stake the claim, to say, you're with us, in a geopolitical sense. My question is about the democratic freedom in that context. How do you continue to have the conversation about transition, about democratic principles, about media freedom, when a lot of international partners seemingly are referencing that, but not necessarily working on it with you, because the agenda is somehow tilted direction? How do you defend liberal democracy in calling out Mr. Putin if you're not otherwise trying to improve it, to make it real for the people in your society? And how do you see your consumers after a generation practically? It sounds to me as if there's not as much public demand for good journalism as one might have expected to see by now.
There are more than one question, I think.
There's a lot. Excuse me. I
More
threw
than
a
one
lot
question,
out
but the last one seems to me to touch upon a little bit on media literacy, which is one thing that we did not talk about, and so
But before media literacy, what I've heard is something which resonates with me. So I've been living in the States for over 12 years now. And anytime I go to the region, people talk to me as I am George Bush directly. And they're asking, seriously questions like, why does America do that? Why are we abandoned? Why you don't care about us? You promised this, you're not doing that. There is more and increasingly there is sentiment among my generation about maybe people who were, who were responsible for revolution and changes in our countries, that we are left, that we are somehow abandoned, that there are many promises were made, but now we are there all alone. And then yes, maybe Russia will come into rescue, or countries from Middle East. So I have to acknowledge there is absolutely that sentiment, that idea in the media and in everyday context. And yes, media literacy is a big topic. My organization does that type of work in the Balkans and internationally, and it's very needed. It's very needed. We had immediately after the changes of international presence, the reporting of media was really great. Nowadays in Serbia, we have really bad reporting on minorities, about women, LGBT population, and it's just sad.
But the consumers are not what
Yeah.
Rob was asking
I
about. The consumers
found-
are not the ones requiring more.
No.
I found your comments very interesting. I mean, when we are talking about Western involvement in the Balkans, I think we can learn many lessons, not just about the media. It's maybe not, but for example, we will celebrate 20 years of the Dayton, and we should maybe ask ourselves what Dayton brought to Bosnia. We have one deeply divided country. We do not have a functional country. And it's so unfair. The country which suffered the most in the Balkans is the farthest from the EU, and it's really, I mean, it was the policy of the short
Term gain.
solutions, not the long-term solutions. And the Bosnian example is the best example. It's really, whenever I go to Bosnia, and I have been working a lot with the Bosnian, we have been implementing many projects together, and we spend pages and pages writing about war crimes committed in Bosnia and our role in the war. And whenever I go to Sarajevo, it's a worse than my visit before. They really feel that they are completely forgotten.
Yep.
And you have this Dayton Agreement, this constitution which you actually cannot change. You are stuck. You cannot change anything in the country. So it's, as I said, the media are not that important, but many lives are destroyed in this region. And the life after the war was very, for many of those who fight really for the freedom and for democracy and for the cooperation in this in this part of the world. And the winners are actually those who were for division of Bosnia, who were for the wars. If you are just look who is leading these countries, this Vucic, who was actually one of the main war promoter in the 90s. The Milosevic's best pupils are leading region. So, I mean, what can we say after that? And they are the best partner and of the Western powers.
So, speaking of international community forgetting or not forgetting the region, I am going to turn to Twitter just really quickly with a question from someone we mentioned several times today, and that is Dunja Mijatović. the media freedom representative of the OSCE, who asked, what can the international organizations, such as my office, do more to abide by their international commitments on media freedom? I personally think she's already doing a lot, but
She's doing great
is there
job.
something more that someone like her or other organizations can do?
I mean, we have still unresolved murders of journalists both in Serbia and in Montenegro. And it's unbelievable that it takes the decades to conclusion in countries such small and connected as ours. So that would be one of the things, like asking, because if we do that, then we can show that nobody is above the law, right?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
impunity, basically.
Dunya is doing great job for the region, and she already she has a lot of problem with with some politicians in our region, because she's really insisting on freedom of expression and freedom of media. They are pushing very hard, authorities in the Balkans, to change some of our laws, and they should continue to do that. They are as well, they stated many times their concerns because of the violence against journalists, and I think they should just continue to do what they did.
Paying attention,
Yes,
Yeah,
pay
first and
attention.
foremost. Here we have a question in the second row.
Hi, my name is Anastasia Kolobradova, and I'm with the Broadcasting Board of Governors. You spoke about foreign media in the region, and I was curious to hear your thoughts about the role and perceptions of U.S. international media in the Balkans, Radio Free of America.
Thank you.
I think especially in the past, Radio Free Europe played a great role in the region. They had this program which was not the local, but the regional program, which actually, and they informed us what is going on in Bosnia, in Croatia, when we did not have any links with them during the war and the sanctions. And still they are playing a very good role in the region. But I heard that they are having a lot of problems in United States because of the budget issue and financing this. In the past, they really play great role, especially Europe. Voice of America was good as well, but Free Europe was really excellent.
Yeah, and Maria shakes her
Yes,
head,
I'm
head
young,
agreeing, obviously. So next question. Oh, Renata here, first row.
Thank you. Renata Stubna, U.S. Institute of Peace. First of all, I would like to thank your speakers, even a great event. I would also, she just reminded me with her question, but I have another point I wanted to make, I would like to praise really Ned in supporting radio, doing this project together with Perspectiva. If you want to say something about that, it's a great series that you can see. I don't know whether there is in English or it's only in Bosnian.
No,
Serbian.
not yet.
Okay.
I can say a word. Sure.
Anyway, what I wanted to say is, first of all, when you mentioned Dayton, yes, we are not celebrating 20 years, celebrating 20 years of peace in Bosnia. We are trying to formulate and word this year like that, and we are marking 20 years of Dayton Agreement. But talking about financing media, I was very close to some donors here just after the war, and I know how much money we were throwing and investing in, for example, B92, so much money, so many Open Society Fund, USAID, they were throwing money left and right on that outlet, and they were doing good job, and their goal was to get privatized, to be self-sustainable, and that's what happened. So this is the future now, I can see. But the future is kind of bleak, and so is this the future, or how did you think the future should look like? Because nowhere it is perfect, but we were hoping for something better, but this is what we got.
Yeah, because
So-
we are in present, I'm not sure about the future, but yeah.
But this is
Their
the
hope,
future
I
from
guess.
like 12
Yeah.
years
No,
ago,
no, I know,
15 years ago,
yeah.
when we were pouring millions in B92.
So, yeah, for
So
B92.
I think to rephrase the question, is there hope?
Yeah. For B92 in particular, there is a petition going on started by some of the journalists first employed by B92 for name of B92, current B92 to be removed, because this one has nothing to do with the previous one, obviously. The fact that somebody brought the brand necessarily mean, obviously, that they brought the continuation of the legacy. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say that, yeah, it's not the same. And also, most of the old B92 journalists actually migrated to TV Novi Sad, where we were, and so your money were in a way good spent, because this is where the best reporting were until recently, if it's for any consolation. Yes.
The privatization of yeah, but the B92 played a really great role in the past. Really, I mean, that was a great media. But then they had non-transparent privatization. Who are the owners of B92? We really do not know. It's some fund from some offshore destination. Who is actually owning this media? We do not know. Now they are insisting on entertainment, not to inform public about public issues and public interest. So that is the sad story. And many of the brave Balkan media ended up as a B92. They were actually in the past the fantastic greats. They have been main opponents of the anti-democratic regimes in the region, but many of them are not existing anymore, or they ended up in the hands of the local tycoons as Dani and Oslobođenje in Bosnia. Feral Tribune is unfortunately closed, and that's why we are saying actually in the 90s we had much more free media than today.
Maria, you mentioned in your response earlier this petition that the former journalists of B92, and that actually is a nice segue into another question we received from Twitter handle Nemanja EU, who asks how to improve media self-regulation. One topic that, again, we didn't talk about so much, and we as a national... Okay, perfect, then we'll have a two-finger here. But we at NED here support some of the press councils in the region, in Bosnia and Kosovo specifically. So if you can touch on that, but let's see what Mark has to add to that question, because...
It follows on all the conversation that you're having right now about the capture of the media by interests that have other desires than to provide information to society, and the whole self-regulation is only part of that. But one of the pieces of unfinished business that involves the European Union and the accession process has to do with the regulation of the media market, the whole question of transparency of ownership, the regulation of competition in the media sector, so that there are open and transparent processes for buying and selling, and that people can't control whole sections of the market. I'm just wondering, in addition to the questions about self-regulation and the practices of journalists, is there any movement, or is there a political support for regulating and creating a modern media sector in the country? These broader set of laws and institutions that have to be in place to create a working marketplace. We see in many countries that as those institutions start to crumble, we have the kinds of problems that you're having in Bosnia. You're in the position of being able to create these things from scratch. And there are countries like Uruguay, which recently put in place some new regulations and approaches to this whole problem of capture of the media. Is there a political movement? Is there political support? Do people understand this or discuss it inside the societies?
Not really. I mean, we do not have political support for the real changes in this field because, for example, I will give you an example of Montenegro. We implemented 3 laws in the beginning of 2000, media laws, to transform state media to the public media and to, make a real media market. But, for example, the state-owned daily was supposed to be privatized in 1 year, but it's privatized just a year ago. So 10 years, this media was functioning legally and was financed by the state and was one of the main media in a battle with independent media. So there is no political will to really change the laws and the change situation in the media. And you mentioned the ownership structure. That is, I think, one of the very important issue which we should have high on the agenda, because many of the media know in the region who are the owners, who is actually behind. Are these business people or maybe mafia people? Because you have some media which are defending the biggest mafia bosses in the region, and maybe you do not know really who is owning this media. Or the case of the B92, which received millions of euros donations from abroad, and now you really do not know who is owning this media. So it's a very important issue, but we are far from solving this problem because we are dealing with the countries in which we do not have a real rule of law.
Yeah, and that's the answer, yes.
And really quickly, just back on the self-regulation. In the countries in which, at least for your countries, to the extent that you're familiar, are there institutions dealing with this? Are there movements?
There are some very good self-regulatory bodies.
Yeah.
I think Bosnia is having the best self-regulatory body in the region. I think it's Press Council or something like that. They are doing a great job. In Serbia, there are as well 2. It's a self-regulatory body, and these 2 associations form this body, which is very good. I did appeal, and they are really great. They are doing a very good job. I don't know how is now, because they were supported as well with the donors' money. Are they functioning if they are losing money? I'm not
They're
sure
functioning,
how is now.
but they're stretching thin, and they're doing many things and trying to be a watchdog, a regulatory body.
They did really good things, but the Bosnia is the best because I think of the presence of the foreign advisors, experts, and they put a lot of attention on the self-regulation in Bosnia.
Well, I'm glad you said that because my boss is in the audience, and we fund Press Council in Bosnia, so kudos.
Good.
Other questions? I saw some hands up earlier, but I think our audience members may have been a bit too impatient. Vlatka in the second row right there.
Vlatka Landa, independent consultant. You're describing a dire media situation and stalled transitions to democracy throughout the region. And to me, what seems most concerning is that we will, even when these elites die off like dinosaurs, we'll still have young generations that have grown up in this media darkness. Should the international community be supporting internet portals that are more likely to reach these younger generations? Is there any hope for the future through the internet? Does the internet play a role?
If I can try to answer the question, starting with B92, because as a journalist from working in Serbia in those times, I really feel, I know B92, but I really feel about. So for many years, journalists of B92 actually had a function of political opposition to Milosevic regime. We didn't have such a strong political opponents, we had journalists. And they, especially journalists from B92, did tremendous job in democratization of the country. Yes, they fought the war. What is missing now is the new generation of similar journalists, and where are they, and what's going on, or how to I don't know, how to revive it. It's a big unknown for me.
But there are some of them really great young people working for the internet portals in Serbia, in Bosnia, all over. And I think internet can change a lot, because they are not just they are through the internet. They are actually communicating with the world, and they can see what is going on. For example, my 14-year-old daughter came to New York. She was not surprised at all, because through the internet she was already there for a year. So I think it's a great chance, not just for the Balkans, but for the world, because you cannot be isolated anymore.
And we had
it's a fantastic tool, but the tool which can be as well misused and can be a dangerous in the hands of those in the power. For example, we have a couple of the big portals in my country, and you can you can post your comments, and you can see so many comments of those who are from the parties, misusing this space on the internet to destroy the opponents, or to spread some gossip and lies. And internet is a
Double-edged sword.
yes. You should be really careful with it.
There is a portal in Serbia called Teleprompter, and it's one of those visited spaces of free information, if you will. And they just published, or not just published, they recently published instructions how to troll. Is that the word? Trolling. So how to troll opponents. So yes, that's happening even in Serbia nowadays. And yes, we have portals that are credible. People go there for information, but I don't think it's enough. And I especially don't think that particularly Serbian portals are reaching the young generation. What is to be done there, I don't know.
So those who are in power, authoritarians, they are using internet a lot. So that's why I think can be tool in hands as well of those who are weak, which is an opportunity.
Let me see. Did you have a question? Okay, Joanne had a question.
And ask, can you talk a little bit about media coverage during
Can you
elections?
just tell them who you are before.
Oh, I'm Joanne Rogers, and I'm here at the NED. I just wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about media coverage during elections, particularly in areas that are very divided throughout the Balkans.
So during the elections, of course, those who are controlling media are having the best coverage. That is simply the answer. It's very hard for the small political parties to have a good coverage on media.
And
for the opposition, they are not equal.
And it's not regulated, and it's not completely clear, at least in Serbia, who gets the money to advertise for the elections, in which way,
Maria, you said something earlier that prompted a question from another colleague of ours here at NED, Andrew, at Twitter handle Podroglieti. I can never pronounce his last name properly, which I'm going to rephrase a little bit. You mentioned earlier that there was too much emphasis and investment in investigative journalism early on, to the extent that it was not necessary and possible to really absorb that. But how about now? Is there enough investigative journalism being done now? And who does it well? What type of support or investment do you think should be made in that particular direction?
So nowadays in Serbia, investigative journalism is mostly done by enemies of state. Anytime that there is investigative piece that's actually broadcast or republished, we immediately hear that this is done by enemies of states. It's against the interest of Serbia, and these are people who are paid by West to spread their messages and work in their interests. So that's a short answer about investigative journalism, mostly in Serbia today. Yes, we have outlets that are still working on it. As we mentioned, BURN, as we mentioned,
Center for Investigative Journalism.
CIN,
I think,
yes.
Yeah, there's one in Bosnia.
Pištaljka,
Yeah,
you know,
we have,
Pištaljka.
we have, we have Pištaljka portal. We have a magazine that I write for from time to time called Novi Magazine, which is done by people from Beta and NUNS. Vreme. I mean, there are places, but the thing is that the reach. First of all, somehow the idea of that investigative journalism is necessary nowadays, it's no longer there. And so that's the first thing. And the second thing is that investigative pieces really emigrated on internet, magazines with little circulation and things of that sort.
Let's see if there are any other questions from the audience. No questions from the audience? Okay, well, I think, as I promised 10 minutes before, we may even end up a little bit earlier. Maybe if we can wrap this excellent discussion, I really enjoyed this. This was really great. Maybe with some last messages and to the audience here and online. I sent quite a few messages, but maybe some last words.
I think we didn't talk, and I think it's important, especially for us, how the special kind of pressure is coming from the courts in my country. We have to pay many high fines for the libel and defamation. So that's how and of course the courts and judiciary, we do not have independent judiciary, and those in the power are used. And even if we are winning at the Strasbourg court, as we won a couple of cases in the Strasbourg court, it does not mean much in our country. So we are still paying the fines which we won in the Strasbourg court, which is against the law. And I think maybe we should conclude that not just in the Balkans, but in the world, even here, media are much more vulnerable today because of the shrinking of the market and difficult transition to the new digital environment. As you know, in the past, for example, if you are coming from the print media, it was enough to have a lot of readers. But now we are losing our readers, and on another hand, the authorities are controlling advertisement, and it's really very difficult to stay in a market. Then autocratic leaders are using these weaknesses of the media, and it is much easier to control media today, I think, than maybe 15 years ago, when you had your readers and everything. Even if you have a highest number of the visitors on internet, you cannot get money for that as it was before through the, yes. And in transition countries like in the Balkans, the governments are largest advertisers and employers, so it is really very easy to control media in this kind of in this environment. And I think we do have a long way to go, but not just because of the. I think generally we have a problem with the in this part of the world.
Yeah, I only have to say
nod your head.
To nod, exactly. Yes, because we can have functioning media without functioning democracy. It's just not possible. And I think when it comes to Serbia, we covered everything. Nothing much else to be said.
I think it's a good message to end on, that without functioning democracies, that it's really difficult to have a healthy media scene, if you will. And it's a good message to send here at the National Endowment for Democracy, where we're really committed to continuing to assist the democratization of these countries. I would like to thank you so very much for what was a very interesting discussion for me, and to thank our colleagues at SEMA, Mark and Valerie and Rosemary and Paul. I think I didn't forget anybody. For organizing this great event. Please join me in thanking the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.